protection officer in the country was in London keeping the dignitaries safe. More than 11,500 officers making sure the coronation went as smoothly as possible. Clearly concerns around counter-terrorism, around special operations and so forth. By and large, the police did a fantastic job. I want to thank the police, the emergency services, TfL staff and so forth. But clearly there are concerns in relation to the arrest, not just those members of Republic, but also the arrests of those volunteers who work with Westminster Council. I think it's right. The police have apologised to those arrested members of Republic. There are still questions I have of the police, and it's right and proper.
What sort of question?
Well, I know, for example, that Republic did everything they're supposed to do in relation to when
months
there's a protest.
Months of meetings.
And some groups don't cooperate with the police. This group did. There's a protest liaison officer. What conversations took place? Did those who arrested those members of Republic know about these conversations? Why did it take so long for them to be eventually released? Did the new legislation play a part in some of the confusion? You'll be aware, James, of the phrase lock on and going equipped to...
This is the Public Order Act 2023.
That's the Section 2 provision, which I think was used to arrest these people. A separate issue, of course, in relation to the 3 volunteers with Westminster Council. Again, local officers know about this question. Those who arrested these 3 know about this. And I appreciate, by the way, the real-time concerns the police had. And I appreciate, of course, these are fine lines and often, imperfect intelligence can lead to mistakes being made. But if we're going to learn lessons going forward, if we're going to earn back trust and confidence, we've got to make sure nobody's under any illusion that you can't protest as long as it's peaceful, lawful and safe.
But there's an interesting dynamic in play here, and I've seen Mark Rowley go a little bit further down the same road that you're on at the moment, which is that the coronation was such a massive event that it kind of gets exceptional treatment, or that we can put some of our principles, some of our hard-won and precious principles in the fridge for a day because the coronation's so enormous in the eyes of the world. Yeah, you can't shake your head. You just listed the reasons. 300 heads of state or prime ministers in town. So, the right to peaceful protest can be paused for 20 to 24. One-offs are rarely one-offs.
No, you've got to be able to walk and chew at the same time. You've got to be able to, at the same time, make sure, and that's why it's so complex, make sure that the event goes smoothly, but also enable people to protest. Now, to remind your listeners, the right to protest is enshrined in the Human Rights Act, which some politicians want to get rid of. It's Article 10. And by the way, sometimes protests can be unpopular. It's not just simply popular things you can protest about. And it's really important that you, at the same time, keep the public safe, make sure there's no public disorder, breach of the peace and so forth, at the same time as allowing people to do what they're allowed to do by law, which is to protest. And I think it's possible to do both. Clearly, it appears mistakes are made, on Friday night, Saturday night, and that's why it's important for these questions to be answered.
And is there any sanction if mistakes are shown to have been made, and you, like many people watching, believe that they have? Is there any sanction? Are there any consequences? It can't be pleasant to spend a night in a cell or to spend any time at all under lock and key, especially when you are wholly innocent of any offences. Do officers or their superiors face any consequences for this kind of error?
Yeah, talking in the hypothetical, because I've not received the responses, but there are issues around conduct.
Said clearly mistakes were made, so that bit's not hypothetical.
Yeah, well, no, but sometimes police officers with the best of intentions can make mistakes, and that's why an apology is the right thing to do. Sometimes it's clearly a misapplication of the law, and there are clearly remedies open to those people, whether it's a complaint to the police watchdog, the IOPC, and I understand from the media, I've not had a chance to speak to any members of Republic, that some may decide to bring civil actions against the police. But it's important we learn lessons. Why? Because in the future, hopefully, there will be protests, because we think protest is an important part of our democracy. We shouldn't, denigrate people who want to protest. The key thing I'd ask them is to make sure it's, peaceful, lawful and safe.
Lee Anderson, known as 30p Lee, suggested people who want to protest against the monarchy should leave the country, I think.
Well, I think, Mr. Anderson should read his history and find out a bit more about the joys of living in a democracy. And if you want, I make this point in a polite, courteous way. One of the joys of a democracy is not simply, being able to vote, but it's also being able to protest, to sign petitions to, dare I say it, lobby your MP. And the idea that everyone's of the same mind is just nonsense. And I suspect, even the royal family, I say that in the context of what the protests are about, wouldn't want to live in a society where people couldn't, protest against them being the royal family.
Final question from me on this. You mentioned politicians. Some politicians, you said, want to get rid of the Human Rights Act. Some politicians would quite like to get rid of the Public Order Act. Are you one of them?
I think there are some provisions of the latest act that I'm unhappy about. Had I been in Parliament, I'd have, with my Labour colleagues, voted against the third reading. There are some provisions of the act which I think are worth keeping. For example, protecting national infrastructure. But it's important to recognise that it is still lawful. It must still be lawful to protest.
You're a lawyer. Keir Starmer's a lawyer. He ruled out repealing this act earlier this week. Is there a confusion among non-lawyers about the distinction between repeal and reform when we talk about bills like this and bills like the immigration bill?
Yes, so when you repeal an act, you basically remove it from the statute books. So even the good stuff in the act you cannot use anymore. And that's why there's a separate discussion about priorities in relation to finite time in a parliament. And so, if there are provisions of any act that should be withdrawn, rather than you repealing the entire act, what you do is you pass a new piece of legislation and have clauses in there which remove sections of a previous act. It's happened forever, continue happening going forward. That's a better way to improve legislation already passed rather than repealing an entire act.
And you're confident that a future Labour government would seek to reform the Public Order Act or the immigration bill?
A question of priorities. I think the fact that the Labour Party in Parliament voted against third reading shows their unhappiness with many provisions of the Act. The question, which I can't answer, is, when it comes to a new Labour government, fingers crossed, next year, how much parliamentary time there is. They'll be dealing with the cost of living crisis, with fixing the NHS, with fixing our schools, with addressing the issue of violence against women and girls and other big issues. And the question is, how much time is there in Parliament to amend legislation? And it's a question of priorities for the then Chief Whip and the Prime Minister.
To the phones.
Good morning, everyone else. I think the first caller is from Tower Hamlets, and it's David. Good morning, David.
Good morning, Sadiq. Good morning, James.
Hello, mate.
Sadiq, as the policing commissioner for London, as long as your other role as the mayor, I spoke to you last year, you and James, on this subject. How many young people have lost their lives to knife crime in London this year? Do you know the number, Sadiq?
I don't know the number, but I know this weekend we had another 2 teenagers who lost their lives, I'm afraid, for knife crime.
One too many, I'm sure you agree.
Spot on.
Just like last summer, what are you doing to address it? Because I keep bringing this subject up every year, and I don't see improvements, sadly.
Well, David, I'm conscious that the families of those 2 teenagers who lost their lives may be listening, so with your indulgence, I want to tell them that I'll be meeting with them shortly to discuss their particular awful cases. In one of the cases, by the way, a 15-year-old has been charged with the murder of a 16-year-old, and it's no consolation to the bereaved family to know that last year we had the fewest number of teenage homicides in any year since 2012, because you're right, David, one teenage homicide is one too many. So the big thing we're doing to try and reduce the number of teenage homicides is to not just make sure youth clubs are reopened, youth workers are re-employed, but to make sure we've got youth workers inside hospitals, youth workers inside police stations, but also youth workers doing outreach work to make sure young people have constructive things to do. And that includes providing 100,000 young people who haven't currently got a mentor. We've got to keep young people busy, but also make sure their aspirations are fulfilled rather than, unfortunately, getting involved in activities that can lead to them, either being injured or ultimately losing their lives. The second part, though, in addition to keeping young people busy and giving them constructive things to do, is to make sure that the police are supported in relation to making sure those people who are carrying knives or offensive weapons have those removed from them. Because what we don't want is a situation where people who carry knives think they can carry knives with impunity. So that means supporting the police and being tough on crime.
What does a mentor do?
So one of the things that we realise is many young people in London may not have a big brother or a mum or a dad that can be a role model and a mentor do them. So a young person is assigned a mentor, and he or she will spend time talking to them, meeting with them, giving them advice, opening up their contacts. They could be helping them get employment, helping them get education. After school hours, weekends, summer holidays, they can ring them up if there's any issues or challenges. And it's basically having a buddy, a big brother, a big sister that you can ring up and speak to, but also proactively giving you advice.
What sort
counsel.
of people apply for that role? Do you know?
So we go and identify groups that already do this sort of stuff. I would probably check who they are. I mean, I in my life, David and James, benefited from mentors, not just big brothers, boxing coaches, cricket coaches, teachers at school. But I recognise many young people haven't got the privilege that I had, and so we try and match up mentors with people who came from similar backgrounds to them, so they can see it, so they can be it. We try and link up young people with mentors in a line of work that the young person wants to go into, because it is really important. Young people, particularly in our city, who haven't currently got aspiration, have that aspiration. And so, we are making progress. But clearly, as David said, we've had 2 more teenage young Londoners killed in our streets this weekend. That's too many.
What would you like to see, David?
I'm a local coach in Tower Hamlets as well, so that's what I do on the side.
What do you coach, David?
Football. And some of the players in the team, when I ask them why do young people, and they don't feel safe, none of the lads I coach carry knives, but there have been recent events where they've been travelling on the mainline train line within London, Sadiq, and they were robbed of their mobile phones by other teenagers producing knives. So they don't feel safe. What are we doing to make them safe? I agree, the mentoring is good. We can talk to them, we can try to be a big brother, but we can't be everywhere at all times in London.
What would help? Can you think of anything?
I think it's, I know Sadiq's not responsible for this, but, lobbying the government, anyone carrying a knife who feels it's okay. A lot of young people, sorry, I get emotional when I
of course you do.
talk about this, but when a 15-year-old decides to carry a knife because it's okay, there is no consequence. And those parents, sadly, are the ones. I'm a parent of 3 kids, and I just feel like Sadiq, and again, I'm talking to you. What are you going to do, to try and make sure that anyone that carries a knife in London gets severe punishment?
David, what it's really so when I go to schools and meet young people, and it's often the football pitch, I often ask them how many of them know somebody carrying a knife, and lots of hands go up, David. And then I ask, why do you think they're carrying a knife? And you're spot on. A lot of young people wrongly believe by carrying a knife they'll be more safe rather than less safe. And so we did a campaign last year, David, with it was a really sad campaign, but it was bereaved mums who'd lost a son talking to young people about the consequences of carrying a knife, and often their sons had unfortunately been carrying a knife and then ultimately lost their lives because too many young people think it makes them more safe rather than less safe carrying a knife. And so what I'd say, I say to this, to parents and big brothers and big sisters who, can't persuade their younger sibling or child to leave the knife at home is actually to ring the police. You can do it anonymously, or you can ring the police, because actually you're doing them a favour by removing the knife from them, because I'm afraid too many people who ultimately lose their lives are people who have carried a knife thinking it would make them more safe, and it didn't.
What can people do if they want to get involved in mentoring? Do you know?
Yeah, contact City Hall. We already are working with some really good groups. So far, we've got more than 42,000 mentors. We're looking for more mentors. Obviously, we could do the proper due diligence and the proper checks and so forth to make sure somebody's an appropriate mentor. But it's a really, by the way, you get something out of it being a mentor, not just the mentee. The mentor also really gets something out of it.
Thank you, David. I know you'll call again, and I can guarantee you'll get put through again. Speaking of people getting put through, I keep handing the mayor pieces of paper with the name of the next caller written on. You could have told me that they've given you an iPad.
Well, it's 2023, James.
No one
and so,
told me. I'm scribbling away here I'm doing court reporting.
Yeah, James, you were the future once.
Yeah,
the second caller, David, thank you for your call. And if you could give James's team your details, I'd love to come and see the young people that you coach as well in Tower Hamlets. And maybe play football as well. The next caller is from Tottenham, and it's Ali. Good morning, Ali.
Good morning, Sadiq Khan. Great job you're doing. But if Keir Starmer wins the next election, fingers crossed, I hope he does. Can you not make the same mistake as Tony Blair and Gordon Brown in from '97 to 2010 and not support the buy to right, basically selling council houses? It's been an absolute disaster the last 4 years. Both Labour and Conservative governments have supported this disaster. That's why we're spending like £30 billion on housing benefit, basically making private landlords rich and paying off their third, fourth, fifth houses. So basically, to reduce homelessness, can you promise or encourage Keir Starmer and the Labour government not to continue this disastrous policy, i.e. buy to right? the idea of selling council houses, public assets into the private sector. Because I'm in a situation now. Sorry, go on.
No, you carry on, Ali. I was about to ask what your personal situation was, but you were ahead of me.
My grandmother died the last year, and my mother died 13 years ago. So I've been a carer for 13 years, looking after my mother, who died from breast cancer at the age of 49 in 2003. So, and then I had to look after my grandmother and my 3 younger brothers. And under the right, this succession, because my mother was the previous tenant, then my grandmother took over the tenancy. Now, Home to Haringey is trying to make me and my 3 younger brothers homeless. So I'm very passionate about this issue. So, because I'm appealing it at the moment, but I don't think I'm going to win this to renew the tenancy. You can understand why I'm kind of passionate on this subject.
Ali, can I also, like James, pass on my condolences for the loss of your mum and your grand?
Can I say, I'm from the Somali background, so I had to look after my dad.
No, of course.
You have to look after elderly.
Absolutely.
But it's for the last 13 years, so I had to give up my life. I've got 2 children from so it's for the last. But it's not about me. But I'm just saying that the policy. I don't know why did Labour government support that policy over the last 13 years. The last 40 since the 80s under Margaret Thatcher when she brought in. They couldn't be super successful. I think Labour would have won that 2010 if they did not have that policy of buy to right. Because now look at the disaster.
Yeah. So Ali, it is about you and people like you. So look, there are many, many things that Tony Blair and Gordon Brown did that I'm incredibly proud of. But I think we've got to have the humility to recognise the Labour government back between 1997 and 2010 didn't get everything right. And one of the things that we should have done is build more council homes. The issue with right to buy, Ali, is you're spot on. Since 1979, when right to buy increased hugely when it's first introduced, for every 6 homes sold off in London, for every 6 sold off, only 1 was rebuilt. So the stock wasn't replenished. And often that stock under right to buy was sold off to the person living there. They then sold it on. And often you've got landlords charging tenants in a former council property rents that are way in excess of what the council rent was. So what I think should happen, and I'm lobbying the Labour government, as you'd appreciate, to make sure it's part of our manifesto, is to build record numbers of genuinely affordable homes, but only allow those to be sold off if they're going to be replenished. And the good news, Ali, is even with this government, we've managed in London to build and complete more council homes than any time since the 1970s. I had a target of 10,000 council homes.
Rishi Sunak said the opposite.
23,000.
Rishi Sunak said the opposite of that, didn't he, in the House of Commons the other day? Or he claimed your predecessor had died.
Let me be quite clear when I say this, James. I'm being very careful with my words.
Yes.
Rishi Sunak is lying. Okay. So let me clear it in relation to starts and bills. So in the years when Boris Johnson was mayor, the numbers of homes completed on average every year was about 25,000. The number of homes completed when I've been mayor is 35,000. So an additional every year of 10,000 homes more completed. In the last year, Boris Johnson was mayor, the numbers of homes where you pay a social rent, which is what Ali's paying, that was started in Boris Johnson's last year was 3. Not 3,000, not 300, 3. And Ali, we've started building 23,000 council homes for families like you. And that's why it's incredibly important. Ali's right. We need a government that's going to be invested in record numbers of council homes. But if they are sold off under right to buy, they're replenished, because we've got a housing crisis in our city where the average rent in the private sector is £2,500. The average rent of one room is £1,000, and that's why we need to be building more genuinely affordable homes.
These claims, these numbers have actually been looked into by one or two of the fact-checking operations, and they support your analysis rather than the Prime Minister's words at PMQs. I mean, can you look at Ali's case individually, or does he just have to wait for the wheels to turn? Because he's got 3.
I've got no powers over Haringey Council, but if Ali again gives your staff his details, I'd be more than happy to contact Haringey Council. And there's, by the way, Ali reminded us there's a particular issue with carers in relation to the lack of support given to carers. Ali's done the right thing, save the taxpayer a huge amount of money. Also, it's part of the teachings of the religion of Islam that Ali follows, and he's been penalised now by the lack of security of tenure.
Caring for your elders?
Really important to care for your elders and stuff. Yeah, it's really important.
couple of texts and then we'll move on to the next call. I should read this out because I read out the criticisms. How refreshing to hear a politician answer a question. I hope it's contagious. And on a slightly different subject, you can watch this all live on Global Player. I should have mentioned that earlier. Evie clearly is. She says, not a question for Sadiq, but I noticed I've never seen James live before. He must sit more upright as his posture is very bad. This is very true. Next caller, please.
For those watching, he's also wearing a hideous green cardigan. The next caller is from South London, and it's Charlotte from Merton. Hi, Charlotte.
Hello there. Thank you for taking my call.
It's a pleasure.
I do have a question for the Mayor.
That's a relief. Go on.
I live in Outer London, Greater London, just on the very edge of South London. With 14 weeks to go until ULEZ goes live, I have no way at all of purchasing another second-hand car or paying the ULEZ charge. I'm terrified. What on earth do I do? I've been turned down for the scrappage scheme.
Well, Charlotte, thanks for ringing in. I'm really sorry you've been turned down for the scrappage scheme. If I could explain why we're doing this, it wasn't an easy decision for
I will make you address her directly after you've given us the
for me
big
to
picture.
do. Sure. It wasn't an easy decision for me to do, Charlotte. But in your part of London, in Outer London, the area is worse than in central and inner London. The 10 boroughs with the worst area in our city are all in outer London. More than 2/3 of those who suffer from asthma and other issues live in outer London. We will make progress in cleaning the air in outer London. It's an issue of social justice and racial justice. So the scrappage scheme that you mentioned, £110 million, is money from City Hall, not a penny from the government. And it's deliberately targeted towards people like you to receive help, whether you're an individual like you, whether you're a small business, whether you're a sole trader, whether you're a charity. So, again, what I'll do, Charlotte, is if I take your details afterwards, I'll look into why you've not been deemed eligible. Do you know what reason they gave you for not being eligible for the scrappage scheme?
I'm on a low income.
Yeah.
I work in healthcare.
Yeah.
I'm a single parent with 3 children at university.
Yeah.
So I am absolutely reliant on my car for my shift work in the hospital
Sure.
and for getting the kids to university. This was their goal. They all went to local schools in South London.
Great.
I want to get them all cracking. I want to get them there. I'm not on benefits. I'm not on universal credit.
Yeah, you don't need to be on benefits to be eligible for the
Did they give you a
scrappage
reason,
scheme.
Charlotte?
All I know is that I've applied online 4 times, and each time it's come back to me, unfortunately, you are not eligible.
Computer says no. Charlotte, let me again, please give James' team your details, and I promise
will,
you I'll
I'm
look
so
into this.
desperate.
And get back onto me if you don't hear from them.
So give James' team your phone number. Don't say it on air, and I'll get my team to ring you today.
How many people are in Charlotte's position?
The good news is more than 9 out of 10 people in Outer London, more than 9 out of 10 have compliant vehicles. Such that the number of people who have a non-compliant vehicle is actually quite small. The figure is, I think, 200,000 vehicles are non-compliant in Outer London, and that's why we've got this scrappage scheme, £110 million. Many people think their vehicle is non-compliant when it actually is. And so what I'd encourage your listeners to do is go to the TfL website, type in your number plate, see if your vehicle's compliant.
Have you done that, Charlotte?
Oh, 100 times.
Okay.
I've tried everything, and with 14 weeks to go,
I can hear the panic.
Well,
I can hear the panic in your voice.
The good news, Charlotte, is there's still a lot of money left in the scrappage scheme. So give James's team your your phone number. We'll speak to you later on today.
Okay.
And see what we can do.
And 200,000 others. Did you say?
Well, no, a lot. That's when we first.
So how many people do we know are in Charlotte's position now?
When we began the process 3 years ago, 39% of vehicles compliant. Now it's 9 out of 10. So it's going down every day, every week in relation to those who are non-compliant.
We circle this quite a lot, and it's absolutely no solace to anybody like Charlotte and many other people. But you have made a calculation here, haven't you? That the plight of people like her, if it turns out that you can't help her, is a price worth paying for it's a utilitarian calculation for the improvement, the overall improvement in the quality of the air that London breathes.
Well, yes and no.
Give me the no, because I understand the yes.
Because I'm conscious of concerns like people like Charlotte is why we set aside £110 million to support them. Because even though we lobbied the government to give us the same support they gave to Birmingham and Portsmouth and Bath and have a scrappage scheme, the government said no for reasons best them.
That's completely clear, is it? They gave money to those cities to provide a scrappage scheme, and they didn't give any to London.
Yep, and we've lobbied them. And by the way, nor have they given money to those areas outside of London where they claim to be concerned about. And so, because I'm concerned about people like Charlotte, we've set aside this £110 million. And I've been criticised, by the way, from some green groups for saying, why are you subsidising people who've got polluting vehicles? Why are you rewarding them? But it's because I understand the concerns of people like Charlotte and many others, by the way, who, for no reason or fault of their own, are driving a vehicle that's compliant.
But you're ducking it a bit, because we're presuming, and I hope that this is not the case, but we're presuming that you can't help her. And even if you can, there's plenty of people that are going to be caught in this. They can't afford a new car.
Oh, listen.
They don't qualify for scrappage. And that they are the price you are prepared to pay. It's a bit like Lord Farquhar in Shrek saying some people are going to die, but that is a price I am prepared to pay.
Look, in politics, the easy and lazy thing to do is try and be universally popular and duck the tough issues and kick the can down the road. I think the issue of climate change and air quality is an issue that deserves and demands addressing now. And so I could set a target for 2050 or 2060 or 2070. I could allow every year 4,000 people on average to die every year because of air quality issues, and children to have stunted lungs in perpetuity, and adults with a whole host of health issues from asthma, cancer, dementia, heart disease. Or I can take these tough actions. And by the way, James, this isn't the first time politicians have done things that may appear unpopular and unfair. Banning smoking in public places in 2006. I voted for that when I first introduced the ULEZ in central London. You and I were here, and we were told the problems it caused for central London and so forth. Removing power stations from the heart of our city in the 1950s, building sewers in the 1850s. So listen, I want to be of that generation of politicians that takes action rather than those that put their head in the sand.
I've got time for one or two more.
The next caller is thank you, Charlotte, and please do make sure you give James his details.
Talking over you. Get back in touch with me and let me know how you've got on with the Mayor's office. Okay, Charlotte.
Well, I will do.
Thank you.
Right.
Thanks, Charlotte.
Thanks
for ringing in. I really appreciate it. Sorry for talking over you, James. The next caller is from Slough, and it's Nick. Good morning, Nick.
Hiya, Sadiq. I just wanted to ask you, as the Mayor of London, your thoughts on the incident that took place a couple of days ago with the homeless man and his two beautiful dogs who were shot and killed by the Metropolitan Armed Police next to a residential housing area. Do you think that was justified? Before you answer, I just want to remind listeners that both dogs were on leads. They posed no risk. Their tails were wagging. You haven't got to be an animal expert to know that when the tails are wagging, they're happy and calm. There were no vulnerable, elderly, disabled or children in the immediate area. And again, the dogs were both on the leads. Have you seen this? What's your thoughts on it, Mayor of London?
So Nick, thanks for ringing in. Look, I'm where you are in relation to. I only know what I've seen in the media, and it is distressing. You don't have to be a dog owner like me and you to be distressed by this. The police watchdog, the IPC, is now looking into this, and it's important they look into this because obviously there was a lethal discharge of a gun. And you'll be aware that the man who was the dog owner was arrested as well. And that's why it's important this is properly looked into. So, look, we've only seen, what we've seen. And so I think we should wait and see for the IPC to do their report. But of course, it's distressing. Those of us who watch this, it's distressing. But I think it is proper for the IPC to be allowed to do their job and look into this.
How long would that investigation, in your opinion,
take?
I think, how long would this take to get to the bottom of it and maybe held this officer accountable? Because it is distressing, and I'm glad to say the majority of the public are disgusted about this. And the Metropolitan Police have once again lost even further support from the public.
I think it's really important that we also accept that you and I and those who've watched this and are distressed by it don't know the full story. By the way, I'm not saying it either way. I'm not, but so the IPC understand there's a huge public interest. The IPC also understand that police officers on a daily basis are making split-second decisions and want the certainty of knowing what they're doing is going to be adjudicated on quickly. I'd hope the IPC wouldn't take months and months and months and months in relation to this investigation. But, I'm not in charge of them. But I think, I hear what you say, and I've got no doubt the IPC is somebody that obviously is listening to what you're saying and understands the need for, expedition with this investigation.
10:32. We'll keep an eye on that one, Nick, and keep track of that investigation as it unfolds. Final call now, which I was expecting actually, but you can introduce the next caller.
The next caller is Alistair Morgan, and for those that don't know, Alistair is the brother of Daniel Morgan, who was brutally murdered in 1987. Alistair, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Alistair.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear, Alistair. What would you like to ask? It's James here. What would you like to ask the Mayor?
I'd like to ask the Mayor if he now accepts the finding of the Daniel Morgan independent panel of institutional corruption, given the events of yesterday, where it was revealed that the Met had concealed from us their finding of quite a large number of documents in a cabinet in Scotland Yard, and that we only found out about this, really, or we first found out about it from a journalist. Would you? Can Sadiq answer that, please?
Yeah, I will answer that, Alistair, directly. But can I firstly just say how sorry I am for not just your brother's brutal murder, but how your family have been treated since, for the fact that nobody's been brought to book for that. No justice has happened to you, and so I do say how sorry I am for that, Alistair. It's really important.
Well, thank you, James. Yeah.
That was actually the mayor. That wasn't me. Although I echo every word he said.
The second issue is, of course, I accept the findings of the panel. As uncomfortable as it is, the panel looked at all the evidence and found institutional corruption, and so you've got to accept the work of the panel and what they concluded. I was told sometime last week about the discovery of these documents.
Who by?
I got a note from my office, and so I'm not sure the paper trail in relation to how it went, Alistair. And so I'm very rarely speechless in my job for reasons you'll appreciate. I was speechless when I was told there was a filing cabinet that was locked.
It was a safe, apparently.
And when it was opened up, these documents were found. My understanding, Alistair, is, and by the way, this will be properly looked into, just to reassure you, my understanding is the reason for the delay is that those documents were gone through to see if they'd already been disclosed to the panel, and only in discovering some of them hadn't been disclosed to the panel, it was brought up to me and the others. My understanding also, Alistair, is all those documents have now been sent to the panel, and the police have again, I hope, apologised to you and your family. But it's not good enough, because I was reassured by the former commissioner there'd been full disclosure. And if you remember, Alistair, the former commissioner didn't accept the findings of the panel and the criticism of...
but you categorically do.
Yeah, look, but also, it's really important to say, we have a new commissioner, and what he's done is, broken open this, whether you call it a safe or a filing cabinet, and made sure these documents are presented.
So
to
this is a consequence of a search, is it? They were looking for things, or it was just someone said, "What's been in that cupboard? Let's open it," or "Let's open that."
No,
safe
I think it's the latter. I think my understanding was
the latter. So accidental discovery.
Yeah, so a line had been drawn. I don't think
because of course Baroness Alone was reassured on several occasions that she had been given absolutely everything relevant to her investigation.
But also, if you remember,
the
previous commissioner didn't accept the criticism of the previous commissioner in relation to the delay, and Alistair knows better than I do. And so the point is, so a line had been drawn in relation to the problems in relation to, I'll be delicate and say it that way, the panel.
Okay.
And so Alistair, it's no consolation or comfort to you and your family, but it's incredibly important that the panel looks into the documents, and I think the panel have agreed to reconvene, just look if there's any salience or relevance in the documents, and it's really important they do so.
Alistair, if you could stick around during the news, I'd like to talk directly to you a little more about this after we say goodbye to the mayor. But before we do that, is there anything you'd like to come back at him with?
No, I think that question has been answered. I would like to say no. I'll leave it there. I think I'll leave it there. But thank you very much.
But you can spare me a bit of time shortly, I hope.
Sure, I can. Yes.
Thank you, Alistair. Okay, and I should add actually before we say goodbye to the mayor that the reason Alistair and his family have been given for the unlikelihood, I think that's a word, of anybody being brought to justice for the murder of his brother is in large part the disappearance and destruction of documents and important exhibits. So, this is the United Kingdom in 2023, and they're turning stuff up.
It's worse than that, because had Alistair not persevered for the last 40 years, 35 odd years, question would this still be being talked about and looked into, and all the rest of it and stuff. So it is very important. We can't just park it because it happened in 1987. It is really important that any lessons that can be learned are learned. But it is heartbreaking that X years on, Alistair's no wiser as to who was responsible for his brother's murder, but also the police officers who may have been responsible for them getting away with it.
Indeed, we will catch up further with Alistair Morgan shortly. But for now, Mayor of London Sadiq Khan, many thanks.
Nice speaking to you.
You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Thomas Watts is here now with your headlines.
Sadiq Khan's told LBC he was speechless after he was told about the discovery of new documents related to the Daniel Morgan case. Files relevant to the private investigator's unsolved murder in 1987 were found in a locked safe at Scotland Yard. A review of improvements in police vetting says some forces